The floorboards creaked in a pattern like someone pacing. At first I thought it was the house settling. The cabin was old, older than the road that wound through the trees to reach it. My landlord had said it was built sometime in the 1940s, though the beams looked older than that, thick, dark wood that held the smell of dust and cold winters. When the temperature changed, the whole place shifted. You could hear it in the walls, in the long sighs of the rafters. So the creaking didn't bother me at first. I was sitting at the small kitchen table with my laptop open, trying to finish a report for work. The only light came from the yellow bulb over the sink and the pale glow of the screen. Outside, the forest pressed close to the cabin windows, black and silent. That was when I noticed the rhythm. Creak, pause, creak, pause, creak. It came from the hallway outside the bedroom. At first it blended with the other noises of the house, the refrigerator humming softly, the distant wind sliding through branches. But after a few minutes I realized it was too regular. Houses settle randomly. They groan and pop without pattern. This had a pattern. I stopped typing and listened. Creak, pause, creak, pause, creak. It sounded exactly like footsteps moving slowly across the hallway floorboards. The thought was so clear it made me laugh under my breath. Probably mice, I muttered. The landlord had warned me about them when I moved in last month. Old cabins came with certain expectations. Drafty windows, unreliable plumbing, and small animals living in the walls. But mice didn't walk like that. They skittered. They scratched. They didn't step with weight. Still, I stood and walked toward the hallway. The creaking stopped the moment I left the kitchen. The silence afterward felt thick. The hallway was narrow, just wide enough for a person to pass through comfortably. A faded runner rug stretched along the center of the floor. The boards beneath it were uneven, their edges worn smooth from decades of use. I stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing. The bedroom door stood open. The bathroom beyond it was dark. The air in the hallway felt cooler than the kitchen, though that might have been my imagination. I waited another minute before returning to my chair. As soon as I sat down, the creaking resumed. Creak, pause, creak, pause, creak. I froze. The sound was unmistakable now. A slow, deliberate pacing. Back and forth, back and forth. I glanced toward the hallway again, though I couldn't see it from the kitchen table. The creaking continued with patient consistency, like someone walking the same short stretch of floor. 5 steps, turn. 5 steps, turn. The runner rug muffled most of it, but certain boards still complained under pressure. Their voices were distinct, one sharp, one long and low. After 10 minutes I realized something strange. The pacing never reached the end of the hall. It stopped short. The creak pattern always repeated in the same place. 5 boards. Back again. 5 boards. I told myself it had to be the house cooling down. Temperature changes could do strange things to wood. But the rhythm stayed too perfect. Creak, pause, creak, pause, creak. Eventually I shut my laptop and went to bed. The bedroom window faced the forest. When I turned off the lamp, the room fell into near total darkness. Only a thin gray wash of moonlight slipped through the curtains. I lay there listening. The creaking continued in the hallway. 5 steps, turn. 5 steps, turn. It wasn't loud enough to shake the walls, but the sound traveled through the floor and into the bed frame. A faint vibration accompanied each step, like a pulse moving through the wood. Around midnight, I realized the rhythm had changed slightly. Not in speed, in weight. The steps sounded heavier. The long creak in the middle of the sequence grew deeper, bending the floorboard lower than before. I sat up. The pacing continued. 5 steps, turn. 5 steps, turn. The strange thing was that I could now feel it under the mattress. Each step produced the faintest shift in pressure, as though the movement were closer than it should be. I swung my legs out of bed and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty, but the air felt different, cooler, and there was a faint smell of old wood, sharper than usual. I stepped onto the runner rug. The creaking stopped immediately. The silence stretched so long that I began to feel ridiculous again. Hello, I said quietly. My voice sounded wrong in the narrow hall. Too flat, as if the walls were absorbing it. No answer came. I walked the length of the hallway slowly, testing each board. One creaked faintly under my weight. Another produced the long, complaining groan I'd been hearing earlier. But the sequence never matched. Not even close. Eventually I returned to bed. The pacing resumed the moment I lay down. Creak, pause, creak, pause, creak. Except this time it sounded slightly farther away. As though the steps had shifted deeper into the hallway. That became the routine. Every night the pacing began around 10. 5 steps, turn. 5 steps, turn. Each night it sounded heavier. And each night it felt a little closer to the bedroom. The hallway wasn't long enough for that to make sense. By the 4th night, I stopped pretending it was normal. I stood in the hallway with the lights on, waiting for the sound to start. When it did, the creak came from directly in front of me. A board near the center of the runner rug bent downward. Not much, just enough for the wood to dip slightly. Then it rose again. Creak, pause. The next board lowered. Creak, pause. The movement continued forward, compressing the floor one step at a time. But nothing stood on it. No shadow, no figure. Just the boards bending under invisible weight. I couldn't move. 5 steps, turn. The pressure reversed direction. The same boards lifted and sank again as something paced back the other way. I backed into the kitchen and left the hallway light on all night. That didn't stop it. If anything, the rhythm grew more certain, more comfortable. Like the walker had grown used to me. I stopped sleeping after that. The pacing continued every night. 5 steps, turn. 5 steps, turn. I measured the hallway one afternoon with a tape measure. From the bedroom door to the end wall was 20 feet. Enough space for maybe 8 normal steps. But the creaking pattern covered only 5. And those 5 boards sat directly in front of the bedroom door. Exactly where someone might stand if they were deciding whether to come inside. Tonight, the pacing started earlier. 7 o'clock. I'm sitting at the kitchen table again. Writing this down because the sound has changed. The rhythm is wrong now. Creak, pause, creak, pause, creak, pause, creak, pause, creak, pause, creak. 6 steps. Not 5. I can hear the new board bending under pressure. It's closer to the bedroom door than the others. The hallway suddenly feels shorter. The creaking stops for a long moment. Then the sound continues. 6 steps, turn. 6 steps, turn. I don't think it's pacing the hallway anymore. The last board it stepped on is the one just outside my bedroom. And the next one is inside the room. Because when the floor creaks again, the sound doesn't come from the hallway. It comes from the board directly beneath my chair. And the pause that follows feels exactly like someone standing still beside me, deciding which direction to pace next. Her bedroom door was locked from the inside. I stood in the hallway with my hand still on the knob, feeling the quiet resistance of the lock through the metal. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the low ticking of the thermostat on the wall. "Emma?" I called softly. No answer. The hallway light above me flickered once, then settled into its dull yellow glow. The door at the end of the hall looked ordinary enough. White paint, slightly chipped near the frame. The same door that had been there since we moved into the house 5 years ago. But the knob wouldn't turn. I tried again, slowly this time. The handle rotated halfway and stopped with a small, dull click. Locked. That wasn't strange by itself. Emma sometimes locked the door when she wanted privacy. She was 16 and going through the usual storms of being 16. But tonight was different, because I'd watched her leave the house 20 minutes ago. I leaned closer to the door. "Emma?" I said again. The hallway smelled faintly of laundry detergent and dust. The carpet muffled my shifting weight. From somewhere outside came the distant rush of a passing car on the highway. Then nothing. I knelt slightly so I could see the narrow strip of light beneath the door. Her lamp was on. A thin band of warm yellow light stretched across the hallway floor. That part made sense. She often forgot to turn it off. But something about the light bothered me. It flickered, not sharply like a bulb failing, just a subtle dimming and brightening, as though something inside the room kept passing in front of the lamp. I stood there longer than I meant to. The light flickered again, slowly, like a shadow crossing the room. I straightened and tried the knob one more time. Locked. "Emma, if you're back already, you can open the door," I said, forcing a casual tone. Nothing moved inside. The house remained perfectly still. Eventually, I stepped away from the door and went downstairs. It was easy to tell myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe Emma had forgotten something and come back inside before I noticed. Maybe she'd gone out through the back door again. Teenagers were unpredictable. But when I checked the front door, it was still locked the way I'd left it. The back door too. And her shoes were gone from the rack by the stairs. I tried calling her phone. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hey," she said over the faint noise of wind and voices. "What's up? Where are you?" "At Maya's." "Why?" I looked up the staircase. From the bottom step, I could just see the edge of the hallway ceiling. Nothing moved. "Did you come back home after you left?" I asked. "No. Why would I?" "Did you lock your bedroom door?" There was a pause. "No. I just left." The answer settled over me slowly. I thanked her and hung up. Then I stood there in the quiet house for a long moment, listening. At first I heard nothing. Then, faintly, something shifted upstairs. Not a footstep, just a soft sound, like fabric brushing against the floor. I climbed the stairs slowly. The hallway looked the same as before. The yellow light hummed overhead, casting dull shadows along the walls. Emma's door remained closed. The thin band of light still glowed beneath it. But it was brighter now. I approached carefully. The closer I got, the more clearly I noticed the flicker. Something inside the room moved between the lamp and the door, blocking the light, then moving away again. I placed my hand on the knob. It resisted in the same quiet way. Locked. The metal felt colder than before. "Emma," I said again, though I already knew she wasn't there. The flickering stopped. The light under the door remained steady for a long moment. Then something moved again. Not across the room this time. Closer. The shadow beneath the door thickened briefly, as if something had stepped between the lamp and the doorframe. My hand tightened on the knob. "Hello," I tried. The word barely left my throat. No answer came, but the light dimmed again. This time the shadow lingered. I crouched so I could see the strip beneath the door more clearly. The hallway carpet pressed into my knees. The light was still there, warm and steady, but now the shadow filled almost the entire gap. Something stood directly on the other side, close enough that the light couldn't slip past it. I held my breath. Seconds passed. Then the shadow shifted. Slowly, like someone leaning closer to the door. The knob twitched in my hand. Just slightly, not enough to turn it. Just enough to feel movement inside the lock mechanism. I jerked my hand away. The knob went still again. The shadow retreated. The light returned to its thin, glowing line. I stayed there on the floor for several minutes, listening to the quiet. Eventually the flickering resumed. The same slow crossing of light. Back and forth. Back and forth. Each pass lasted a little longer than the last. Like something pacing the small distance between the bed and the door. I stood up and stepped back. My throat felt tight. The hallway seemed narrower than before. I walked downstairs again, grabbed the spare key from the kitchen drawer, and returned to the hall. The light under the door was still flickering. The same slow rhythm. Back and forth. Back and forth. I slid the key into the lock. It turned halfway before stopping. Something inside the mechanism blocked it. I pulled the key out and stared at it. Then I tried again. The key refused to turn any farther, like the lock had been engaged from the other side. The flickering inside the room stopped. I felt it before I saw it. The shadow returned to the bottom of the door, closer than before. The thin strip of light shrank until only a narrow line remained. I realized the shape of the shadow wasn't flat. It had depth, like feet standing inches from the door. I leaned down again despite myself. The carpet scratched softly under my palms. The shadow moved slightly, not stepping away, stepping closer. And for a moment, the light inside the room changed angle just enough that I could see the faint outline of toes against the floorboards. Bare feet, facing the door, standing perfectly still. My chest tightened. "Emma?" I whispered again. The feet didn't move. The hallway felt colder. The thermostat clicked somewhere downstairs, but the air didn't warm. I slowly stood up. The knob turned gently, from the inside, just a fraction, then stopped. The lock clicked softly, unlocked, but the door didn't open. It stayed shut. I stared at the knob for a long time, waiting. Nothing else happened. The shadow beneath the door disappeared. The light returned to a steady glow. I should have opened the door then, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped back down the hallway. Something about the silence felt wrong now, too attentive, like the room was listening. I went downstairs again and sat in the living room. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Emma again. "Dad," she said, laughing faintly. "I forgot my charger. I'm coming back to grab it." I looked slowly toward the staircase. "Okay," I said. "You're home, right?" "Yes." "Good. I'll be there in 5. The call ended. The house returned to silence. Upstairs, faintly, I heard it. The bedroom door opening. Just a soft creak. Then the slow sound of footsteps crossing the hallway. Not toward the stairs, toward the top of them. And when the first step above me groans quietly under someone's weight, I realize the bedroom door is still closed, because I can see it from here, and the thin line of light beneath it is still there.